So we are in the middle of the first Pirkei of Shemona Prakim, and the last time we saw how important it is to understand how important it is to understand the soul, the mechanics of the soul, the nature of the soul, and we're going to continue on that. And now where we're up to is where the Rambam offers his idea of the makeup of the soul, because as we saw, it was very important to the Rambam, and he's going to stress it again, the part that we'll see today, that a person only has one soul. He doesn't have three different souls. There is one unified, one single soul that expresses itself in various different areas and expressions and extensions. And so let's see the breakdown of the soul according to the Rambam. There are 5 chelkei hanefesh. Again, they are not 5 different unique nefashos. There is one nefesh, and this nefesh is 5 different chalokim. Hazon, v'hamargish. So I gave you guys in the chat, I gave you guys the text that we're seeing today. This is the Pirkei Avos of Shemona Prakim. We're using Rav Shelat's version. This is his translation, although it's a little archaic, but it's good because also he edited it based on the Rambam's Ksav, as we said on one of the previous year. So Hazon v'hamargish hamedame v'hamesoyer v'hasichli. So these are the 5 nefashos. These are the 5 chelkei hanefesh. So what they, and then later in the Perek, the Rambam is going to come back and review each one of these and give us a background of what it means. But in just the basic breakdown, Hazon is the Kamash and get to nutrition. It's the nutritive soul, you could call it, the nutritive soul. V'hamargish is the sensitive soul. Hamedame is the imaginative. Hamesoyer is the best translated as appetitive. V'hasichli is the intellectual. So you have and you see how this, if you look at all 5, you see how there's a continuous up, there's a ladder. So the most basic level is the nutritive. So that is something that all living organisms have in common, right? So think of a plant. A plant also has that nutritive soul because it absorbs certain nutrients. It breathes in certain things. It gives out other things. It has its own system of how it grows. And when we're talking about the chelek hazon of a person, that is what we're talking about. We're talking about the digestive system, the reproductive system, even the stomach, right? Whatever the body absorbs, and what it breaks off as things that it doesn't need. All that is the nutritive soul. Then you go up, and then you have the sensitive soul. The sensitive soul are the 5 senses that even animals have, right? You have touch and smell and sight and hearing. So these are that is the sensitive soul. Now we don't mean sensitive as in emotions. That is going to be the appetitive, really. That's where the emotions. That's like the emotional soul. I would even call it. That's really the misoyer. We'll get there in a minute. So you have basic. This is the nutrition system. Then above that you have the sensitive, and that is, so the basic one is everything that all living organisms, including plant life, have in common. Then you step up from there, you go to the animal life, and that is the soul that could feels, touches, smells, sees, hears, and acts for the main part. That is sort of the soul that acts. That is the sensitive soul. Above that you have the imaginative soul. So that we'll have to have the Rambam break that down for us. because that's not the intellectual soul, which is the highest and obviously uniquely human, and that is sort of the pinnacle, and that is how someone who has a functional, useful, productive intellectual soul, but in between that we have the appetitive soul. So the appetitive soul is the wants, the emotions, you would say the kinna, taiva, kavod, all that is in the appetitive soul. So these are the 5 souls, and then the Rambam has to reiterate something we saw last time, but now the Rambam stresses it again, and this is extremely important to him, and that is that just like we saw last time, a person does not have 3 different souls. A person only has 1 soul. And last time we stressed why it's so important, and now we'll see it again. The Rambam takes it to the next logical steps. The Rambam says like this: when we're talking about the appetitive soul or the sensitive soul. So in the sensitive soul, we're talking about the pleasures that a person intakes through his senses. Let's say, for the sake of what we're talking about now. So a person can't come and say, you know what? Well, like we said that the nutritive soul and the sensitive soul. So nutritive soul a person has in common with all plant life even. And the sensitive soul a person shares with all the animals. So you know what? I'll let my sensitive soul be an animal, because ultimately, where is the difference? Where do we draw the line between man and beast? So we don't draw that line in the sensitive soul, because an animal also eats and hears and smells and does all these actions, right? So really, I'll work on my intellectual soul, maybe even my imaginative soul. I'll work on that. I'll do whatever you tell me to do in that realm. But mashanegeya, to my sensitive soul, which I share with all animals, then you know what? I'll do what all animals do. The Rambam says, no, it's not true, because you don't have an animal soul. You don't have your nutritive soul, your sensitive soul, even though you have that in common with many plants, and with every plant, and you have that in common with every single animal, but your soul is uniquely human, and because you only have 1 soul. If you were to have 5 different souls, then I could say, okay, that soul, if you have a unique animal soul, if you have a unique sensitive soul, a unique nutritive soul, then I can say, okay, that soul you all have in common. All animals have that in common. So now I'll let that part be beast, let that part be animal, and then don't work on it, because it's not negaya. The Rambam says that's not the case. And I stressed already that that's not the case. You have 1 uniform soul. So whatever goes on in one travels to the other. It's influenced, it influences in return. They all influence each other, they all work together, they all grow off each other and have a two-way relationship. Therefore you can't separate these things. So let's see how he says it inside. Ki koich hamazon, or koich hamazon, or hanizon, whatever it is, because the nutritive soul, the nutritive koyach that you have in you, al derech mashal ashel adam, enenu koich hamazon ashel chamar v'lasos. So you have a horse, and so you say, listen, this horse grows and eats and smells and sees and hears and has a digestive system and a reproductive system and all that, and so do I. So I have sort of an animal soul within me, and I'll let that do animal stuff. So the Rambam says no. Ki adam nizn b'chelik hazon min hanefesh ha'anushis, v'chamor nizn b'chelik hazon min hanefesh ha'chamoris, v'dekel nizn b'chelik hazon min hanefesh ha'shaloi. So you have a plant, you have a dekel, right? You have a palm tree, and you have a donkey, and you have a person, and they all digest. They all have intake, they all digest, they all spit out whatever they don't need, they all reproduce, and they all, and if you can apply it to a donkey, then it lives and smells and hears and acts in certain ways. But you should know that each one of them act out of their unique system. So a horse has a horse soul. Now this horse's soul has a nutritive aspect of it. The horse's soul, so to speak, expresses itself in the nutritious area, the nutritive area, and also in the sensitive area. It doesn't have an intellect, but it has whatever that has. And that's why when you see a horse eating, you're seeing a horse eating using the horse soul the faculty of the horse soul. But when you're eating, you're not a horse that's eating. You're acting out of a completely different, koyach. So let's see. So let's take this piece all the way to that. They have the same name. They all share. What they share in common is the terminology. But that's all. That's where it begins and ends. It's the terminology. So don't get confused, because sometimes we use the same term because they do explain the same phenomenon, but they aren't the same thing. We say that they both have, they're both sensitive, right? They both have the five senses. They both feel the five senses. It's not that when I hear or smell, it's the same thing that when a horse hears and smells. Even a horse is different than a donkey. וישחייבו מנפש זה פעולויס, אם מנפש זה פעולויס, ואפשר תדע מפעולה לפעולה, ויחשב שתי פעולות שם דבר בעיניי, ואין הדבר כן. So this is just, he says, again, this is strictly philosophical, and that's why it's maybe a little tiring, but the Rambam is stressing something that's extremely important to him, and sort of behind the entire thesis of Shemona Prakim, and that is that even though you see that you could think, and there were those who thought that, and by the way, the Rambam is going to be one of those people in a couple of years. The Rambam Shtickle steps back on a lot of this, but let's come back to that in a minute. So even though you see that you share a lot within in your senses and in your soul, so to speak, your mechanics of how you work, you share a lot with an animal and even with plants, don't come to the wrong conclusion that there is part of you that's beast and part of you that's not. And the problem with that type of thought is that might bring you to say that your beast could just be an animal and continue to be an animal, and you'll just work on the human aspect, and that's wrong. And now he gives a Gevaldige mashal. He says that he just brings this mashal for the idea that there can be three things that all sort of have the same result, and that's why we're going to use the same terminology to explain the phenomenon, but they're coming from three different things. Say you have a dark room. One is lit up by the sun, one is lit up by the moon, and one is lit up by candlelight. So all three of them were lit up. And you're going to use the same terminology to explain all three of them. They were dark, and now there's light. But that does not mean that the source of light is all the same source of light. Right? One is the sun, one is the moon, and one is fire. So in the same way, an animal eats, a plant eats, and a person eats, and the same thing is that they all reproduce and they all have digestive systems, so to speak. But that does not mean that a person shears that soul. No, a person has his source of light that gives, that lightens up his room, and the plant life and the animal life. And L'mayan Afkemina, then Afkemina is because when you try working with it, and that's really what we're going to try doing now, and that is key. When we're going to try to fix it, if you have the dark room, if the room that was lit up by the sun went dark, now you're gonna have one way of dealing with it, and that's going to be a very different way than the one that was lit up by fire, right? Because maybe there's a tree that you need to chop off that's going to let the sun in, and the one that has fire, you need to fuel the fire. If we're trying to fix it, and that is what we're here for, because we are trying to fix the soul, and we understand that it's one soul, so we can't just fix one unique part of the soul. We need to understand the soul, because we need to fix the soul, because we want the soul to function, because we want eventually the soul should be able to be a channel and a vessel to be able to connect to Hashem and to be able to reach its full potential. So that's why we need to understand that there's a unique human soul. Because if it's broken, we want to know how to fix it, and the way to fix it is by that we'll see a little later. But first we need to understand. So that's the mashal that he gives now. You have three dark places. They're all lit up. So they're all lit up. They were all dark. They're all lit up. It all looks the same, but they all have different. They're all lit up by different powers, and each one of them have unique reasons why they could work and why they won't work. And each one of them, by the way, also have ways how they could if unchecked, let's say the fire, you need to know what you need. On the one hand, you need to fuel the fire, and you need to make sure that the fire won't be extinguished by whatever element, and you also need to make sure that it doesn't burn other things, right? So all these things are very, very important to know. So now when the person has his koyach hachush, right? He has a sensitive soul, and we understand that it is uniquely human, and that as part of it, the nefesh ha'adam, then we understand that when he is eating, there's the human eating, and it's not an animal eating. And he has to take responsibility for that, and he has to take care of that. Fine. Ken poel argashas ha'adam hu nefesh ha'adam. Ipol argashas ha'chamor, nefesh ha'chamor. Ipol argashas ha'nesher, nefesh ha'nesher. Ve'ein lem ini nikabtzem elo shitav sham bavad. And all they share is terminology. Ve'hesig ze'enin shu nifla moed. This is very important to know. Because you kash lebeharbim and a mistalfim. A lot of philosophers make this mistake. And they make terrible, not only mistakes, like they come to absurd conclusions. So based on their understanding of the soul, they come to crazy conclusions, and we need to make this very important. This needs to be very important to appreciate and to understand. There's a story attributed to Aristotle that someone once saw him. Someone saw him acting inappropriately. So for someone who wrote, ethics and a lot of these ethics are coming of Aristotle and the people that were influenced by him. So some, I don't know, I think the story comes with names. Anyway, so and so approached Aristotle and told him it doesn't pass. You big, you talk about ethics and morals and all that, and you act in such an inappropriate way. So he said, if a mathematician teaches, mathematician that teaches geometry, does that mean that he's a triangle? Right? So you could teach geometry, but that doesn't mean that you're a triangle. You don't become a triangle. So I could teach ethics, but I don't have to act ethical. I can tell you what is ethical, but I don't have to act ethical. And that is sort of that type of palginon, so to speak. This is the type of dialectics that the Rambam is coming la'afuke. That he doesn't believe that that's true. It's dafka not true. That all these things are connected, and your appetitive soul and your intellectual soul, and even your nutritive soul and sensitive soul, they're all interconnected. And yes, you are a triangle. If you are, we're not talking about so in math, obviously you're not a triangle because it's completely separated. But when we're talking ethically, and that is our subject matter, we're talking midas, because the noise that we're trying to get is we're trying to fix the person, and the way we try to fix tikun nefesh b'chor ben haguf. So we have to understand what the human being is, what the makeup of it is, and we have to understand that it's all interconnected and it doesn't split anyway. So you can't say I'm only going to work on my intellectual soul, and that way I'll be able to connect to Hashem, I'll be able to reach my potential as a human being and be and all that comes with that, but I'll do whatever I want and I'll act like an animal. That's not true. It doesn't work like that, because your mind is connected with your senses, it's connected with your growing, they're all interconnected. Now, they all have different responsibilities, and that's what the Rambam is going to say in Pirkei. We never talk to the digestive system, because there's no reason to talk to the digestive system. We don't have anything to tell them. The digestive system is an autopilot that works off whatever the senses fed him, right? So you have the sensitive soul that eats something, and then the digestive soul has to dissect that and take care of that. So we're not going to talk to the digestive soul. And by the way, we're not even going to talk to the intellectual soul, because we don't have anything to talk to that either, because the intellectual soul is already the destination. And we're not talking about, we're not dealing with the intellect yet. We are trying to fix the machine. So we're going to talk, the Shemona Parakim, the Rambam is going to say in the next parak, who exactly from these 5 souls. Again, so we have a binyan, we have a ladder. We have the nutritive soul, sensitive soul, imaginative soul, appetitive soul, and intellectual soul. And we're going to have to see next time, obviously the Rambam says that they're all one soul, there's one soul. And that soul, the nefesh adam, is neither any of these. These are faculties and koiches and expressions of the soul. But these are the 5 areas in which the human soul expresses itself in uniquely human way. And then our next job is going to be first, the Rambam is going to break them all down. So we did some of that already. So that we're going to have to see next time. He's going to break down each one of these 5, explain what they are, what the functions are, how they work, and what makes them unique. And then Once we understand the soul, we understand the mechanics, we understand all the expressions of the soul, we'll isolate which one of these 5 we could talk to fix the soul. Because again, the digestive system, you have nothing to talk to. So we're not going to talk to the digestive system, and on the other hand, we're not going to talk to the intellect, because that's way ahead of us. So we're just going to talk with the parties that can make a difference, with the parties that can fix our machine, and once we understand them, and we understand who we need to talk to, then we'll see what makes them healthy, what makes them sick, and how we move on. Thank you so much for joining us. See you again tomorrow.